When I was 16, my friends and I went to this water park just outside of town. It was the kind of place everyone knew about. Twisting slides, massive wave pools, a lazy river winding through a fake jungle. But there was something else everyone knew too. Something whispered among the older folks. Stories about the water park being built on old cursed land. Some said it was once a burial ground. Others believed it was the site of strange rituals long ago. We laughed off those stories back then, eager for a summer day filled with fun. Looking back, I wish I had paid more attention to those warnings. The day we went, it was a blisteringly hot afternoon, the kind where the air shimmers over the asphalt, and you can practically see the heat waves. The park was packed. Families, screaming kids, groups of teenagers like us. It was chaos in the best way. We dove into the action right away, racing down slides, dunking each other in the wave pool, and floating aimlessly in the lazy river. Everything felt normal, or at least it did at first. But even then, I had this nagging feeling, like a subtle chill that ran down my spine whenever I glanced at the park's towering slides. It felt as if someone, or something, was watching us. By midday, we were ready for the Abyss, the park's most infamous slide. It was the main attraction, standing tall at the far end of the park. The slide twisted and turned in the air, almost reaching the clouds, or so it seemed. There was a rumor that once you started the descent, you wouldn't see daylight until you shot out the other end. We laughed about it while standing in line, trying to ignore the cold sweat on our backs. As we climbed the seemingly endless staircase to the top, the air around us grew heavier. The higher we went, the quieter it got. The usual noise of the park, laughter, splashing water, music blaring from the speakers, faded, replaced by a low hum that seemed to come from the slide itself. My friend Tim noticed my unease. He was always the jokester of our group, a guy who never took anything seriously. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he teased, nudging me. "Scared of a little water?" I forced a laugh, trying to ignore the way my heart pounded in my chest. When it was finally my turn, I hesitated for just a second before pushing myself into the tube. As soon as I entered, everything changed. The slide was pitch black, darker than I had ever imagined it could be. The water that rushed around me was ice cold, almost painfully so, and it felt thicker, like I was sliding through some strange, dense liquid. The slide twisted sharply, throwing me from side to side, and it felt like I was descending deeper and deeper into the earth. Panic set in when I realized that the slide was far longer than it should be. It felt like I was sliding for minutes, not seconds. The usual thrill of a water slide turned into something else. Fear, raw and paralyzing. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The darkness around me felt alive, pressing in on all sides. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the slide changed again. The water around me grew still, almost solid, and then, without warning, the world shifted. I was no longer sliding but falling, plummeting into a vast, endless pool of pitch-black water. My stomach lurched as I dropped, and then I was underwater, flailing and gasping for air. The water was frigid, like ice needles piercing every inch of my skin. I kicked and thrashed, fighting my way to the surface. When I finally broke through, gasping for breath, I looked around. I was still in the park, but it wasn't the same place I had entered. The bright sunny day was gone, replaced by a sky that was a dull, overcast gray. The water around me was eerily calm, reflecting the sky like a dark mirror. I spun around, looking for the lifeguard who was supposed to be at the pool's end, but all I saw was a shadowy figure standing at the edge. The figure was tall and thin, dressed in a lifeguard uniform that looked faded and old. His face was hidden in shadow. His eyes, if he had any, were voids that seemed to pull me in. I yelled for help, but he didn't move, didn't react. His stillness was more terrifying than if he had lunged at me. I dragged myself out of the pool, my body trembling uncontrollably. The park around me was nearly empty. The once crowded wave pool was now filled with only a handful of figures floating aimlessly, their faces turned upward, eyes wide and unseeing. They were eerily still, bobbing with the faint movement of the water. I recognized some of them. They were people I had seen earlier, kids and adults who had been laughing and playing not long ago. Now they looked like lifeless dolls. My heart was beating so fast as I walked to the snack bar. The place looked empty. The bright snack stands had turned gray, and the food inside was rotten and moldy. I looked through the glass of one stand, and I saw my reflection. But it wasn't my face. It was me, but not really. My eyes were hollow. My skin looked pale and sick. I stumbled back, almost falling, my breath coming out in quick gasps. I turned around looking for my friends. I shouted for Tim, for anyone, but my voice just echoed back at me in the empty park. No one answered. Then I heard a melody. It was a soft, haunting tune that seemed to come from everywhere at once. At first it was quiet, like a lullaby, but it grew louder with each step I took. The sound led me toward the lazy river. But it wasn't the same. Now it was a slow, dark stream surrounded by dead trees and twisted vines. As I got closer, the air became colder. The melody changed into whispers. They were soft and hard to understand, but they filled my head. I knelt by the river, looking into the murky water. Shadows moved underneath, writhing and shifting. My reflection was there again, but this time, there were figures behind me. They had no faces, just empty, staring eyes. I jumped back, my heart racing. The whispers grew louder, turning into strange cries. I had to leave. I ran as fast as I could, my footsteps echoing around me. I sprinted past the wave pool, which was now a black, empty void, and past the slides that looked like twisted monsters against the dark sky. The park was no longer fun. It was a maze that seemed to change with every turn I made. I reached the gates where we had come in earlier. They were shut tight, locked with thick, rusty chains. I pounded on the gates, screaming for help, but everything outside was silent. It felt like the water park had trapped me, holding me in its creepy grip. I slid down, my hands cold against the metal, tears running down my face. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. I jumped and turned around. It was Tim. His face was pale and his eyes were wide with fear. "Where have you been?" he asked. His voice was shaky. "We've been looking for you for hours." I stared at him, confused. Suddenly, everything was normal again. The sun was shining, and I could hear people laughing and splashing in the water. My friends stood around me looking worried. I tried to tell them what happened. The slide, the darkness, the shadows, but the words came out all wrong. Tim shook his head, his face showing he didn't believe me. "You must have passed out or something," he said, trying to make sense of it all. But I could see it in his eyes. He was scared. They all were. They helped me up, and we left the park quickly. As we walked out, I looked back at the abyss. It was tall and scary against the bright sky. It looked the same, but I knew it wasn't. We never talked about that day again. My friends wanted to forget it, to act like it never happened. But I couldn't. I knew something real had happened. The water park wasn't just haunted, it was alive. A twisted place that had pulled me into its world, showing me things I wasn't meant to see. Years have passed since then. Sometimes when I drive by the park, I feel it watching me. From the outside, it looks normal. Bright slides, kids running, families having fun. But I know the truth. I've heard more stories since then. People go to the park and come back different, or sometimes they don't come back at all. Some people say the park is cursed, that it traps souls and messes with reality. Others think it's a doorway to another world, where things aren't what they seem. I don't know what's true. All I know is that it's still there, waiting.